Hey everybody, welcome to your horoscopes for the week. These are the horoscopes for the last week of September. We're all the way up to the last week of September, week ending October 1st, Saturday, October 1st. So we've got the very end of September covered here in these horoscopes. And this Mercury being retrograde is still, not a pain in the ass, because let's face it, from the time it started, it has just been a pain in the ass. I'm just gonna go ahead and put it out there and call it what it is, right? Um, we also have a mutable grand cross at the end of the week. Yay! And that Mercury position is going to make things very difficult this week. So let's go ahead and we're going to get started here, and we're going to start as we always do with Aries. And currently right now we still have Jupiter in retrograde in Aries this week. It will continue to be retrograde. Good thing you're not a mutable sign, we'll just put it that way, because it might be a little bit more difficult for you if you were, but it is still a bit of a challenge. As the sun moves into Libra, the moon also moves into Libra. They're very much in conjunction with each other. That Jupiter is going to move into opposition with both planets, as well as that retrograde Mercury as it bumps into Virgo. And there's a little bit of Venus in there as well. So we've got like 4 planets right on the cusp of Libra and Virgo, and Jupiter is just going to be in opposition of all of them. So that does create a bit of a challenge. When you have an opposition, and the issue with an opposition, of course, is that two aspects of your life are sort of fighting each other. And with your focus on home and everybody, all the other planets focused on career, this does sort of create a little bit of um, a bit of a challenge as you're trying to focus on things, that responsibilities that need to get done at home. Your career is pounding on the door going, no, 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 our responsibilities are way more important than whatever you got going on at home. And it's really hard to toggle back and forth. My thing about this is I feel like we all go through these sort of difficulties, especially moms, but dads too. Let's just face it. And even if you're not a parent, this can come up for you. And so we have to deal with this all the time. We've got responsibilities at home we need to take care of. You got stuff coming up at work, or the alternative to that is, while you're home dealing with those responsibilities, your mind is still focused on all the things you got to do at work. And when you're at work, your mind is focused on all the things you have to do at home, and you're not paying attention to what's in front of you. And that's really what this comes down to. When you have a ridiculous amount of responsibilities in both places, the best thing to do is to focus on what you're doing in the moment. So you got bills that need to be paid and you're just trying to find the money at home. If you're at work, you should be focused on work. I mean, obviously that's where the money's going to come from, right? When you're at home trying to focus on what you need to get taken care of there, and your mind is so busy thinking about all the things that you got to do tomorrow at work, you're not paying attention to what you're doing at home. And so when you're not focused on what you're doing, this creates problems. You could miss something. You're not really fully taking care of what you're supposed to be taking care of. It just becomes a nightmare. When Mercury is retrograde, a part of all of this, it makes it an even bigger nightmare, because Mercury is going to screw things up. To be honest with you, pardon me, to be honest with you, at the time I'm recording these horoscopes, the retrograde has literally just started. And it started with a bang. I am not kidding. The shadow period was just a nightmare. When it actually started, just everything was chaotic and crazy that day, including doing Grubhub and going to Dunkin' Donuts 3 times, and they had no donuts. Like their donut machine just like broke the night before, right? And so you go to a donut place that is literally out of donuts, and that's the day that everybody wants donuts. It's just an example of one of those crazy things that happens when Mercury goes retrograde. And sometimes people are like, oh, well, that sucks. That's okay. Just, replace it with a sandwich. And then you got your other people who are like, are you effing kidding me? What do you mean they're out of donuts? And you're the one having to deal with it, right? It comes down to two things. One, it does come down to self-care. If you're so busy at home and you're so busy at work, you're not taking care of you. And when you're not taking care of you, you're not meditating, you're not relaxing, you're not doing something to quiet your mind. So you're not focused on all of these things at the same time. Your energy gets spread thin. You start to get irritated. And because Mercury is retrograde, everybody else is irritated too. So this is really going to be a problem. It's very, very important for you to focus on the task at hand and make sure that there is time for you to be able to regroup and not have to focus on all of it. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're going to move on to Taurus. There has been some big deals in Taurus. There's been some big challenges in Taurus. And yet, for the first time, everybody else is having the challenge and you guys aren't. I mean, there is a little bit of a challenge, but it's not like it is for everybody else. So let's all take the moment to sit back and go, it's not me this time, right? Because we just got to take our celebrations as and when we get them. You know what I mean? Uranus is still in Taurus. Uranus is still retrograde this week. Of course, it's going to continue to be retrograde into next month, which actually the end of this week is next month, but I think we're going to go a couple more weeks in. So we're almost there. It's so close. We're almost there. And focus is really on your day-to-day schedule. Now, the beauty of Uranus being in Taurus right now is that beautiful grand trine that continues this week. It is going to start to break up at the end of the week, but at the beginning of the week, it's still very much there and very much helping you out. This grand trine between Pluto, also retrograde, Mercury, also retrograde. We have a little bit of an element of the sun and the moon in there as well as they move out of Virgo and into Libra. They're right there on the cusp. So they're very much a part of this grand trine as well. Lots of planets involved, lots of planets working together in order to help you out. Pluto is focused on the past. All the other planets are focused on career. You're focused on your day-to-day schedule. This is a prime opportunity for two things to be happening right now. One, it's a beautiful opportunity for you to make sure that you prioritize work in your schedule. But remember mistakes that you've made in the past. You don't want your entire schedule to be focused on work, right? You need time to rest, and everybody needs time to rest, even Tauruses. In fact, to be honest with you, I think fixed signs need to give themselves a little bit more time because their energy levels, I'm not saying that fixed signs are slow, but the energy tends to run at a bit of a slower pace than, say, your mutable sign, which is in 10 places at once, right? So to me, being a fixed sign, it is, in my opinion, or at least what I have learned over the years, is that it's absolutely necessary for me to have time to slow down and stop. And we're not just talking about slowing down, we're talking about stopping and doing nothing. I love my melt on the couch time where I just have several hours to play on my phone, watch one of my favorite TV shows. There's one that's just come out and I'm super excited about. I haven't even started it yet. I actually schedule this time in my schedule because it's so necessary for me. If I don't take that time, the whole next week is just shot because I can't focus correctly. So it's about resting your body, but it is about resting your mind also, and that's really important. Now we do still have that square there with Saturn, which is of course still retrograde this week, and I think that retrograde is going to end too, coming up here this month as well. So we do have that square there. It is a bit of a pain in the rear. It's okay though. It's very much focused on the mind, and this really just plays into making sure that you take that time off for yourself and quiet the mind. Taking time off does not mean I'm going to think about all the things that I have to do next week. No, that's not taking time. You're not taking time off. Your body may be resting, but if this isn't resting, you are not resting. It's very important to make sure that everything you give yourself, even if it's just a couple of hours of nothing, no thinking, no planning, no nothing. And I know that's hard for earth signs because you guys really like to get things done. But the truth is, rest is just as important as everything else. If you don't rest and take the time to rest, you don't have the energy to take care of everything else. And it only gets worse as we get older. So you may be able to handle it now. It's going to get more difficult as you get older. And to be honest with you, if you don't want it to get more difficult as you get older, start these processes now. Trust me on this. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And I'm going to move on to Gemini. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, it's getting scary for the mutable signs, especially as we get to the end of the week. But before we bump into the end of the week, let's just go ahead and look at what we got right now. We still have Mars in Gemini. To be honest with you, Mars is going to be in Gemini through the rest of the year. And we'll be going retrograde in Gemini at some point towards the end of the year also. Not this week, which is okay. However, we are moving into a T-square as Mars is squared with Mercury, which is retrograde, and Neptune, which is in Pisces, also retrograde. Now, two things about this. First of all, a T-square is a pretty big challenge. With Gemini focused on relationships currently, and you have a challenge in relationships that can be very difficult, but it's also something that happens all the time. People don't always agree. You have certain situations come up, and you don't always agree with yourself. Okay, you were talking Geminis here. Maybe you don't always agree with yourself too. But in terms of those relationships, you don't always agree with your partner, or you don't always agree with the people that you're working with. You come up with a plan. You don't always agree. That's okay. The problem with being a Gemini is most of the time you're smarter than everybody around you anyways, but it's hard really to convince everybody else that sometimes. And sometimes, even though you have all that intellect, sometimes that intellect is completely working against you. And so your intellect is going so quickly that you could be making mistakes. So it's important to actually take a step back and listen to what's going on around you. Could go either way, really. Now, with Mercury's focus being right there in the middle of your long-term goals and your career, you may be finding yourself sort of trying to focus on both at the same time, and it's not working really well. And Neptune's focus is right in between your mind in terms of how your mind works and the home. So we are disagreeing with a few people is what that looks like to me. It looks like you may have some issues, agreeing with your spouse or those that are in your home, but you also may have some disagreements with people at work as well. And this just sort of creates this space where it just feels like you're an alien, you're not speaking English, everybody else doesn't understand what you're saying, and you're a Gemini. Most people aren't going to be able to think on your level unless they're another Gemini, right? Now, as we get to the very end of the week and the moon moves into Sagittarius, your opposite sign, this T-square becomes a mutable grand cross. Now, grand crosses are the biggest challenge that you can have. And when we're talking about mutable energy, we're talking about challenge that is literally energetically all over the damn place, right? It's like everywhere you turn, there is a problem. And while Geminis are very good problem solvers, it does get to a point where it's just a little bit so much. You're like, you know what? I'm sick and tired of cleaning up all the problems, right? And it just makes you want to run away and hide somewhere. And you know what? That's okay. If you want to run away and hide somewhere, it's Saturday anyways, right? Hopefully you don't have to work on Saturdays. It's a good day to seclude yourself. It's a good day to take some time to yourself, to ignore everything else that's going on out in that crazy world. Do some gardening, do some self-care, do anything, but try and go out and fix problems that are just unfixable, if that makes sense. Or do anything but try to go out there and fix everybody else's problem. Work on your own problems. It's not like you don't have any of your own, right? We all do. So this week, it gets a little bit crazy. I'm not going to lie. And that craziness, the cardinal or the mutable grand cross, of course, is for one day. But the T-square, that's not going away anytime soon. We're looking at a couple of weeks for sure of having this issue. And the good news is it's not all bad. There is still a trine with Saturn, which is retrograde. And that trine is really trying to show you that the way that you're thinking about these situations, your thought process, in terms of how you're thinking about these situations is really going to make or break you. And that's why usually when you start thinking, and this is a very Gemini thing, you start thinking about the problem and in your mind, you're already coming up with a solution for the problem. You got to avoid that. Okay. Some problems just can't be fixed by you or should not be fixed by you, period. So other problems that are yours, absolutely, you should be focused on those. But if you got a bunch of people coming to you with their problems saying, hey, I need you to fix this, you just tell them, I am overwhelmed right now, or I have enough on my plate right now. I'm sorry, but I can't fit you in. You're going to have to figure that out for yourself. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to Cancer, who has no planets. Cancer sitting back there going, that's right. Watching the chaos ensue around them with a nice little drink with an umbrella because they don't have to deal with all that chaos, which is awesome. Focuses on finances for you Cancers this week, and Pallas Athene and the Dark Moon continue to influence this part of your life. Pallas Athene is the warrior queen. The Dark Moon of Lilith is all about change from a very deep level. It's really about looking at the way things are and going, you know what? I do not like this concept. I'm going to go with a different concept. We all find ourselves in that position of looking at the old way of doing things and just saying and just realizing that it is not going to work for you, or it's not going to work for me. Some people are big on investing their money. That just doesn't work for me. And there's multiple reasons why that doesn't work for me. It's really important, of course, you get advice from other people on what to do in order to achieve your financial goals. But it really, for Cancers especially, you really want to trust your gut and your intuition on what makes the most sense for you. And you may have a million people telling you what you should and shouldn't be doing with your money. And that's okay. They can tell you all day long. It's up to you to make the decision. Don't feel, especially with a Mercury retrograde going on this week, you want to make sure that you're aware that there are people who may want to try and bulldoze you into doing something. They are trying to push you into, this is the best way to handle your finances. But you know the best way to handle your finances. And the more you focus on what works for you, what your intuition is telling you is the most comfortable, the more successful you will be. And we're not just talking about making money here. We're talking about what to do with it once you have it, making your money work for you. It allows you to eventually work smarter and not harder. So I have a Cancer child. I'm always telling him what he should do. And he resists it so much. But then he comes up and he does his research and he comes up to me and he says, I've decided to go with this. It makes sense because that is what works for him. And just because I'm looking at how life is now doesn't mean that it's going to be the same when he gets to retirement age. I mean, I'm not even at retirement age yet, and it's looking a little wonky. So when he becomes, gets to that point where he's retirement age, it can be a completely different world. And the way that it's looking, it probably will be. So it's really important for him to trust his knowledge and his gut in order to move in a direction financially that makes the most sense for him. And you Cancers need to do the same thing. Your money is your security. You need to take care of that money in the way that feels the most secure for you. And that's really what that is all about. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to Leo, also sitting back, watching the chaos around them ensue and not giving two beeps about any of it because it's really not concerning them. Well, of course it does concern you, because especially if you're out there dealing with other people, you're going to have to deal with it. Mercury is still retrograde and causing a lot of issues this week. So luckily there's no planets in Leo that are going to aspect Mercury, which is good. It does sort of limit down the way that Mercury affects you. But if you're working with other people, you're going to be dealing with the Mercury retrograde. That's all there is to it. If you have to see other people at all, you're going to be dealing with the Mercury retrograde. That's all there is to it. And most of us have to go and deal with people. So there's really nothing that we can do there. This week is really focused on, there's a little bit of an element of your finances and getting those financial things taken care of. But there's also, we're also focused on long-term goals. Specifically, let's talk about your long-term financial goals. This is something really important that needs to be talked about, especially if you haven't done anything about it yet. There comes a point where you run out of time. In all honesty, there comes a point where you run out of time and there is nothing that you can do about it. And we want to avoid that if we possibly can, depending on how old you are. If you are a young Leo in your 20s, then you have plenty of time to get a lot of money together for your retirement. Not plenty of time to put this off until later, okay? That's what I thought when I was in my 20s. Here I am midway through my 40s, still don't have it taken care of. But I do still have about 20 years to get something done. I just need to do it. Financial goals are important. You can't just make money and spend money and expect everything to be okay for forever. It really doesn't work like that, unfortunately. Eventually, you run into a point where you need extra money. And if you haven't been putting it away, you're not going to have that extra money. You're going to have to wait. You're going to have to sell something. You're going to have to borrow the money. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that you're going to be forced into doing because you didn't put that nest egg together or put that nest egg aside for yourself later on. We all go through it, unfortunately. We all find ourselves in that boat unless we're financially responsible. So this week really is all about that. Now, in terms of how you do that, there's a million different things that you can do. There's a million ways to do that. My best advice is to do your research, is to talk to as many people as you can, get some ideas, and go with the one that feels right for you. Any financial planner that I've ever talked to, be that for my own finances or my clientele that are financial planners, they will pretty much tell you the same thing. The best thing that works for you is the way that you want to go. So do your research, get as much information as possible in order to make the best decision for you. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Okay, we're gonna move on to Virgo. Things are crazy in Virgo this week. Oh my gosh. Virgo and Libra, man. Poor signs are just getting it this week. Of course, we have that Mercury retrograde going on in Virgo. and it is full on in Virgo now. And we're looking at this week being the last really full week of the Mercury retrograde, which is actually the good news because it does end next week, although we do have that little bit of a shadow period there, like we always do. But it's not just the Mercury retrograde that's the problem. It is Mercury, that Mercury is in opposition with Neptune in Pisces, also retrograde. Both are squared with Mars in Gemini. This creates a pretty big challenge called a T-square, where you have all three planets sort of working against each other in some way. Now, with your focus on career this week, Mercury's retrograde focus being on career, two things are going to happen with that, actually. One, it may feel like your career goals you've made that you maybe have been rushing towards are starting to slow down a little bit. And you don't want to panic because of that slowdown. It doesn't mean that things are slowing down forever, but it does mean that things slow down sometimes for a good reason. Sometimes you need things to slow down just to make sure that you can double check everything and make sure that you're on the right track with your career goals. Now, Neptune's focus is on the home. Actually, it's sort of right there in between the home and how you think about things. So we do have a little bit of a struggle there in terms of where your focus is. Your focus is on your career, but you have things at home that need to be focused on, or your focus is on your home, but you've got a lot going on in your career. So you want to kind of focus. It sort of pulls you in those two different directions. Then we have Mars coming in, which is focused on relationships, which is causing an issue there as well. So first of all, Mercury is going to have communication problems. So you really have to be watchful for that. Miscommunications happen during Mercury retrogrades all the time. It's just the kind of why Mercury retrogrades happen. And it's not necessarily to drive us all crazy. I mean, I know it feels like it's, there to drive us all crazy, but that's not necessarily why Mercury goes retrograde. Actually, Mercury goes retrograde in order to allow us to change the way that we communicate. So it brings these communication problems up more and more and more to give us an opportunity to be able to see how this type of communication isn't working. We need to change the way we're wording things, maybe change the emphasis on certain words, different things like that. So a really good example of this actually is when you allude to things. So if you are, say, having an issue with somebody, and rather than just coming out and saying, hey, I'm having a problem here with the way that we're working together and the way that you're communicating and the way that I'm communicating, let's see if we can find a way to work this out. Instead, you sort of allude to it like, yeah, it's not really working for me, but it's okay. We can deal with it, right? That's not fixing the problem. You just basically gave that person permission to continue to miscommunicate anyways, making your life crazy, right? You don't want to make your life crazy. You have to get to the point. And I think that, in all honesty, if I'm going to look at any sign in the zodiac that is absolutely excellent at that, it is going to be Virgo. You Virgos are excellent communicators when you want to be. Just make sure that you're taking the time to communicate exactly what you need in the moment. As you're communicating exactly what you need in the moment, things are going to be a little bit easier for you, especially because, of course, Mercury is influencing your sign above all the other signs. Things get really hairy, though, at the end of the week when the moon moves into Sagittarius and this square turns into a mutable Grand Cross. Now, the Grand Cross is the mother of all challenges. This is the biggest challenge you can get in the zodiac. We have all four mutable signs with a planet that they're either opposing each other or they're squaring each other. So we're looking at four planets that are really having a hard time with each other. The moon's focus is on self, and this is where it gets very interesting, because if it feels like you're being pulled in a million different directions, None of those directions are going to be on you. Self-care is so important. It's something that has been coming up a lot around. I mean, you just hear the word self-care everywhere these days, which I think is awesome because, in all honesty, I don't remember ever hearing the word self-care growing up. I've only been hearing it the last 10 years or so. Maybe because I talk a lot about self-care and have, but I'm hearing about it from various different sources because, in all honesty, it's becoming more and more and more important. People are starting to see that if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to handle all the other stuff that you have going on as well. I have a Virgo boy. This kid's always moving. He's always from this place to this place to this place, and he's working like a dog in the middle of it. He knows, even he knows at 26 years old, if he doesn't take a day to sleep all day, he's not doing self-care and he's not going to be able to keep up that kind of pace. And you Virgos have a hefty pace to keep up with. Self-care is absolutely necessary to keep that pace going. If you don't, it's not going to work out very well for you. And you may wind up getting sick or needing to rest on a day where you have a lot going on. It's better, much better for you to schedule that self-care time on a day where you don't have a whole lot going on. So on the day that you do have a ton of stuff going on, you can handle it. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're moving on to Libra. Let me just start off by saying a very happy birthday to the man behind the camera. Actually, he's not really behind the camera anymore, but he makes this shit look good. So kudos to him. Let's wish him a very happy birthday. He deserves it all. We'll just put it that way. It's almost perfect. So close to being perfect. It's just not even funny. We have the sun in Libra. We have Venus in Libra. We start off the week with the moon in Libra. There is a party going on in Libra currently right now and focuses on the career. And with focus on the career, unfortunately, both of those planets are in opposition with Jupiter currently in Aries at this time, Jupiter being retrograde. And of course, at the beginning of the week, the moon is very much involved in all of this as well, because the moon is in conjunction with the sun, meaning we're starting off the week with a new moon. To be honest with you, a new moon is a perfect time to start a project. It's a perfect time to create a goal and get things moving. I love goal setting using the moon's schedule because it keeps you on track. So if that's something that you're thinking about, this is a perfect time to do it, of course, because it's Libra time. And if you are a Libra, this is a really good moon to start off a project with. So if that's something that you want to do, more power to you. With focus on the career this week and that opposition with Jupiter, Jupiter is very much focused on the home, and Jupiter is retrograde also. So Jupiter is all about expansion and growth. Obviously, things are not expanding or growing in the home. Changes that you're trying to make may not be able to be made at this time. So it kind of feels like you're going backwards a little bit, which is a little bit annoying. However, in terms of focus on your career this week, it is really important to get creative. And I think this is what Venus is all about. Being that Venus is your ruling planet on top of it, it really just makes that creative energy that much more powerful. And I haven't met a Libra that isn't like uber creative in some way, shape, or form. I think they're brilliant when it comes to that creativity, because Libras are an intellectual sign. They are air signs, but the other two intellectual signs are not known for being creative. They're known for being smart, but they're not necessarily known for coming up with creative ideas. That's why this Aquarius lady needs her Libra, because that Libra brings a lot of creative ideas to the table that I may be missing. And when it comes to your career, if you need to make changes, you may have to get a little bit creative. there is something to be said about the definition of insanity. If you're trying to do the same thing over and over again and it's not working, you're just making yourself crazy. You're not really moving forward. If you want to move forward, it's really important this week that you get uber creative, because the more creative you get, the more successful you might get also. And that really makes a huge difference. So that is what I have for you guys this week. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to Scorpio. Focus is on support, family, and we are moving out of that secret closet that we have been focused on for the last couple of months. And yes, or I should say the last month or so. And yes, that's been heavy. And yes, we don't want to deal with it anymore. I totally get it. Unfortunately, though, it still very much is there. But we're moving on to support and family as well. And I think that this is really important because one of the things that we, especially Scorpios are so secretive. I mean, they just keep everything locked inside of themselves. And that is not necessarily the best course of action for you. I understand why you do it, but it's not necessarily the best thing for you. When you keep things locked up inside of you, they just fester. They get bigger. You find triggers all over the place. It's just not good for you to do that. And it's your family and your close friends that really are the ones that are going to help you out the most. Every Scorpio I've ever known has trust issues. They have a really hard time trusting other people. I understand that too. This Aquarius has a lot of trust issues also. That's why you pick and choose the people that are closest to you as the people that are going to be probably the best person to help you, if that makes sense. So this week really is all about when those things start to come up, finding that person that you're comfortable with in your support system to be able to talk about this thing that is just, it will not go away. It's uncomfortable. Sometimes just talking about the problem, I have found so many times that in my head, this problem is just huge. And once I start talking about it, it really isn't that big of a deal. All of a sudden, as I'm hearing it in my head, I'm going, why am I making such a big deal about this? It really isn't that big of a deal. Well, it wasn't, but I was making it a big deal. And when you put a voice to it, not only are you looking at it for what it is, but you're also giving yourself this opportunity to be able to let it out. Because if it's been stuck inside of you for a long time, it's just growing bigger and bigger and bigger and becoming a much bigger problem than it really needs to be. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And I am going to move on to Sagittarius. It is all about you this week, Sagittarius, with focus on self. And for most of the week, pretty free and clear, to be honest with you, at least right up until the end of the week when the moon moves into your sign. Now, here's the issue with the moon moving into your sign. Most of the time, no big deal. This week, it is a big deal as it moves into opposition with Mars and squares with Mercury. God, I've said it so many times, I forgot what it was even called. Moves into a square with Mercury as well as Neptune. This creates what's called a mutable grand cross. Now, grand crosses are the biggest challenge that you can get in the zodiac. So obviously, we don't want to deal with the biggest challenge you can get in the zodiac. But lucky for you, it's only for one day. Everybody else has to deal with it all week long. Because it's the moon for you, you're dealing with it for a day and then it's moving on and then everything is sort of happy again. First of all, when we're talking about focus on self, we want to talk about self-care. Self-care is really important. And I feel like with the moon influencing this challenge, self-care is really important at this time too. I feel that the fact that this is happening and the fact that the moon is what's influencing you and bringing you into this grand cross, it's emotional self-care, if that makes any sense at all. And we all need a little bit of that emotional self-care from time to time. just recently, as a matter of fact, there's been so many crazy things going on, things that emotionally hit me in a very emotional way that I just didn't have time to. And I kept saying, I don't have time for this. I've got so much to do. So I'm going to put this emotional stuff to the side. And I literally got like 3 days before energetically, I was about to lose my mind, to be honest with you. I just couldn't do it anymore. I had to go home, put on something that was going to make me cry, and just bawl for 4 hours because I needed to release all of that stuff that I just didn't have time for earlier. And I really feel that for you guys this week, this is the moon coming into your sign and making this grand cross is what it's all about. It's that emotional release. Sagittarians are not necessarily known for doing that. Okay. They're known for that's okay. I'll deal with it later. I've got more important things to do. Let's go do them. And even when you do have time, that doesn't sound fun. I'm going to go to the fun thing. Honestly, you can only do that for so long before you just go absolutely batshit crazy. And who needs to go batshit crazy if you don't have to? Take the time to get emotional. And if you feel emotional on this day, we're talking about the first of next month, on 1st of October. If you're feeling emotional, let yourself be emotional. Let yourself, I know it seems weird to sit down and watch something that you know is going to make you cry, but sometimes you got to get those tears out. Life is stressful right now. Life is a lot less fun than it used to be. There's a million reasons why you just need to have an emotional release. And I feel that that's really important for you guys, especially as we get down to the end of the week. As far as the rest of the week is concerned, it's really a great opportunity to focus on some personal goals that you have, some personal changes that you want to make, any of those types of things. Of course, self-care is always important, but self-care is not all of it. There's a lot of things that you have to do to be able to feel like you're operating at 100% capacity. So self-care, pardon me. So self-care is just one of those things. We also have growth in your career. We also have growth in your relationships. There's a lot of things to focus on. Pick one of those things or pick two of those things and focus on that this week and improving those things. So that's what I have for you guys this week. I'm going to go ahead and move on to Capricorn. We still have Pluto in Capricorn. Of course, Pluto is still retrograde and focused on the past. And again, Pluto is the only planet that is not negatively aspecting any other planets in the zodiac. You still get to have all the fun, and that's just awesome. Retrograde Pluto or not doesn't really matter. Pluto's all about change and transformation. And being that Capricorns don't like a lot of change anyways, even though your cardinal signs, that's really not a bad thing, actually. As Pluto lines up in a grand trine with Mercury, as well as Uranus, and in a grand sextile with Uranus and as well as Neptune. These are all very helpful aspects. We don't have any negative aspects this week at all. These are very helpful aspects. And in terms of the grand trine, Mercury's focus is very much on right in the middle of career and long-term goals, while Uranus's focus is very much on your day-to-day schedule. I will say that Capricorn is very much focused on the past, but not in a I'm just going to sit and think about the past kind of a way. Is more of a focusing on different aspects that were helpful in the past to be able to use currently right now in terms of your goals, your long-term goals, your career goals, even your scheduling goals. Because it's not that I see a lot of changes necessarily coming up for you guys. It's more of a wanting to be prepared for any changes that may be coming up in the near future. In terms of that grand sextile, Neptune's focus is very much right in between the home and how you think. And so with that being said, you're basically focused on everything right now. And while it seems like that would be a very challenging thing, it's really not, because I feel that this week it really feels you guys are on top of it. You guys, your focus is exactly where it needs to be right now. It's a perfect time for you to be able to focus on all of these things without getting completely overwhelmed. So good on you guys for being able to have this sort of break that nobody else is getting, because it just, to be honest with you, everybody else is just getting hit like crazy. You're even using that Mercury retrograde to your advantage, which is good. And when I say using that Mercury retrograde to your advantage, this is one thing that Capricorns are really good at. Sometimes things just don't need to be said. And I think that sometimes not saying anything is better than saying a million things, because sometimes not saying anything winds up being more helpful in the long run than actually writing a book about it. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to Aquarius. Still have Saturn in Aquarius. Saturn is still retrograde in Aquarius. Saturn is still squared with Uranus. Also, Uranus is focused being right there on the cusp of your day-to-day schedule. And Saturn and Aquarius's focus is very much on how you think. Now, this is a good focus for Aquarius to be in, first of all, because our brains are our best friends and our worst enemies. Hands down, best friends and worst enemies. I love that I can pick in there into my brain and come up with some lovely information, because I've learned so many things over the 45 years that I have been on this planet. At the same time, when I have a problem and I worry about it, it goes on and on and on and gets hugely blown out of proportion. And in terms of how you're looking at your schedule, I have found, honestly, that sometimes when I have a very heavy schedule, or even when I don't have a very heavy schedule, I'm still looking at it in a very negative way. Oh, I have way too much to do. Oh, I don't have anything to do. This is a negative thought process that doesn't really help you meet your goals. So if you're looking at it like say, I don't have anything on my schedule, I have nothing on my schedule, that kind of energy doesn't promote me finding something to put on that schedule. If I have a very heavy schedule, I'm looking at it in a negative way. I'm not appreciating the fact that my schedule is heavy, and that means I'm making money. So the universe is like, oh, well, if you don't want if you don't want a busy schedule, we don't have to give you one, kind of a thing. If you're trying to manifest more money, you don't want to complain about how much is on your schedule, even if it does feel like it is a bit overwhelming at times. And we all go through that. That's why you put a little extra time in there for you to be able to get through it and to manage all of the craziness that's going on in your schedule. We also have a trine with Mars, and Mars is focused on relationships. And in terms of how you think about things, those people, your relationships are really helpful with that. Aquarians are big talkers. I think that it's really important when Aquarians are going through this crazy, chaotic stuff going on in the mind, that talking about it really does help. I think I mentioned this in another sign earlier today. It's always much easier for me to talk about things because it releases my anger. I stop being so angry about the problem because I'm getting it out, kind of a thing. And that anger isn't driving me, with everything else that I'm doing, because quite frankly, you don't want anger driving anything that you're doing. It winds up kind of getting in the way and screwing things up. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're going to move on to Pisces. We have Neptune right on the cusp of how you think and focus on the home, in opposition with Mercury, who is a retrograde, right on the cusp of focus on long-term goals and your career. And this is a bit of a challenge And it is a much bigger challenge, of course, when both planets are squared with Mars for the entire week, right up until Saturday, where the moon moves into Sagittarius and this T-square becomes a mutable grand cross. This is a big challenge. It really is. And there's a lot of things that can come out of this big challenge. Miscommunication being number one, because Mercury is involved. How many times have you sworn that somebody didn't say something and they go, I did say it, I did tell you, but you didn't hear it, or you don't remember it, or let's just face it, they didn't say anything. They're just trying to cover their own tracks. You know, that happens all the time. I feel like Neptune being on the cusp of how you think about things really is important. The more you flip through these problems in your mind and you keep quiet about it, and I know a lot of Pisces who just close down and they're like, no, I'm not gonna talk about my problems. Well, if you don't talk about your problems, they get stuck in there and they fester forever. That's number one this week. You really want to find the right words to communicate the problem, not complain about the problem, but communicate to the person you have a problem, and not in an aggressive way, but in a way that they're going to understand, or in a way that they're going to feel what it is that you're saying. That's number one, and that's really important. By doing that, you're not doing that same miscommunication dance that you've been doing over and over again, which is creating chaos. Mars being a part of this also is a little bit tricky, because Mars is a very aggressive energy. And so with the Mercury retrograde there, with the moon at the end of the week coming in, we're talking about a very emotional experience and possibly a very emotional conversation. But this emotional conversation probably needed to happen a long time ago. And it's just got, the planets are just lining up perfectly to give you an opportunity to have that conversation, because it's been overdue. You've been needing to have this conversation for quite a while now. So that is what I have for you guys this week. And that is what I have for everybody this week. Thanks for coming and hanging out and checking out the horoscopes. I'm Melissa Bruce, the Heavy Metal Psychic. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. You guys have a great week, everybody.